left off in the middle of the Melocha of Shochet on page 895. We were in the middle of this section that taught that Shochet means not only taking a life, but also taking blood from any living thing, because Hadam hu hanefesh, the blood is life. The pasuk in Pashas Acharei from a few weeks ago, and therefore taking blood is equivalent to taking life. So it's included in the Melocha of Shochet. So we're going to learn about different things that cause bleeding. And with that, we'll conclude the chapter and the Melocha. We'll move on to the next Melocha. 895, Steve, applying pressure to stanch bleeding. Who is our Balkoide today?
Rabbi, I can read. I just want to get the other Sefer, please.
Okay.
Okay.
Right now, I want to remind you that Bris Mila would have been the Melocha of Shochet, but Torah says that it overrides Shabbos if it is the 8th day of the baby's life. If a Mila is done any later than the 8th day, it does not override Shabbos or Yom Tov. Okay, Steve.
You said why causing bleeding is the Melocha of Shochet.
No, it's further 895C, applying pressure.
895C. I don't have a C on 895. Oh, so mine's on 896. Okay, sorry, that's why. Is that applying pressure to staunch bleeding?
Right.
Okay. It is permissible to apply a styptic substance that halts bleeding, whether in a liquid, solid, or powder form, to a bleeding wound. One may also apply pressure to a bleeding wound in order to slow or stop the bleeding, even if the wound is not life-threatening or serious. Preventing bleeding is quite the opposite of shochet. Only pressing to extract blood is prohibited. A tourniquet may also be used for this purpose, but should not be tied with a double knot, kosher. A bow knot or safety pin should be used to bind the bandage around the wound.
Okay, so this really doesn't have anything to do with shochet. It's just that people commonly mistake one for the other because they both involve bleeding. So he's telling you that stopping the bleeding is nothing like shochet.
If the tourniquet will be untied and removed within 24 hours, a double knot may also be used. Profuse bleeding or hemorrhaging. In the case of profuse bleeding or hemorrhaging, which is life-threatening, any course of action may and must be taken to stop the bleeding, including using the telephone to get professional help. As a first aid measure, the bleeding can usually be controlled by applying pressure. Example, pressing fingers or heavy gauze directly to the wound, or tying a tourniquet around the wound. Note, improper use of a tourniquet is extremely dangerous. It must never be used unless the hemorrhage is so severe that it cannot be controlled any other way. What is that?
Tourniquet is a tight bandage. Now, the issue with it is that it can not only stop the bleeding, it can stop circulation. That's why it's dangerous if you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah. Removing splinters. It is permitted to remove a splinter that has penetrated one's skin, even if doing so may cause bleeding. However, if possible,
for a minute, it's the dover she'enim miskaven. You don't want to cause the bleeding. It is not a psik reishe, not inevitable. So you may remove the splinter, although it might result in bleeding. However,
if possible, one must attempt to avoid causing any bleeding while removing the splinter. If the splinter is deeply embedded to the extent that its removal will inevitably cause bleeding, removing the splinter is still permitted if the individual is in pain, and certainly if there is fear of infection. This leniency is caused on a combination of factors. Regarding further details on removal of splinters on Shabbos, see Goizes. Note, when sterilizing the tweezers or needle, one must not put it into a flame, because making the needle become red hot is the meloch of mavir or bishul. The needle should be sterilized by dipping it into alcohol or an antiseptic solution. If this isn't available, the needle may be passed back and forth over a flame without allowing it to become red hot.
right, these are all incidental. The issue really is the bleeding caused by removing the splinter. By the way, all infections are treated as serious, even on a finger, because infection spreads and can end up being life-threatening. So you have to treat infections on Shabbos because it is a serious business. So, okay, let's continue.
Examples of shochet. Washing a live insect down the drain, example, rinsing lettuce to remove live insects, flushing an ant, spider, etc. down the toilet. Stepping on an insect to kill it, walking on a swarm of ants, spraying insecticide on an insect, sucking bleeding gums or applying pressure to any bleeding wound, putting out poisons to kill rodents.
Okay, so that's the Melochos, shochet. And remember that there is a series of Melochos, just like there was a series of Melochos in the production of bread, starting from plowing the earth, planting a seed, harvesting it, etc., all the way through to baking. That's an 11 Melochos series of the process of baking. So too, there's a Melocha of several Melochas involved in producing hides. So the first one is shochet. The next one is skinning the animal after it's dead. That's the idea of the next Melocha, mafshit. Mafshit is like the word pshat. Pshat is the surface meaning of a word or of a sentence, a postic, let's say, that the pshat, and to be mafshit is to take off the surface. The basic premise, go ahead.
Of mafshit. After slaughtering, the animal hide must be removed in order to process it into leather, parchment, or fur. In the Mishkan, the skins of the rams, the elim, ma'adomim, and the fur of the tachash were removed in the same way. Skinning the hide from the body of an animal is the melocha of mafshit. Animals to which the melocha of mafshit applies. Mafshit applies to any animal that has a hide, including fish and birds. Therefore, peeling the skin of a raw fish to produce parchment or some other item of use is the melocha midoraisa of mafshit. Similarly, removing the skin of a raw chicken or turkey is mafshit. Removing the skin from cooked fish or chicken. Removing skin of cooked fish or chicken is not considered mafshit because the cooking effectively causes the skin to lose much of its natural adhesion to the flesh. Thus, the essence of mafshit has already occurred through cooking. Additional reasons why mafshit does not apply in these cases. Some poskim explain that the melocha of mafshit is not applicable when eating a food. It is comparable to the melocha of boire that does not apply while eating. It can also be reasoned that mafshit applies only to removing the skin of an animal, whether living or dead. However, when an animal is cooked, its meat is reduced from the status of an animal to that of a simple food, oichel. The melocha of mafshit does not apply to foods, even of animal origin. Removing inedible skin. Skin of fish which is not edible must only be removed just before eating because of boire. However, a chicken or turkey skin, which is edible, may be removed even earlier. Some poskim rule that the skin of the chicken may only be removed just prior to the meal, similar to the skin of fish. One who has an aversion to the chicken skin should abide by this ruling.
Now,
Example,
if you don't like chicken skin, then that becomes stoilus, waste. And removing it from the chicken would be boider. I'm not sure why this should be different from peeling an orange, where clearly the orange peel is waste and you want to get to the orange. So likewise over here, it should be considered like peeling the chicken. But for some reason, not clear to me, this is the problem of boiler, so you should do it while you're eating. Okay.
Rabbi, can I just ask, isn't it a redundant thing? Because in terms of raw fish, or the next example says removing the skin of raw chicken, wouldn't raw chicken be muktzah? You know, well, you can't eat it. It's not something that you're going to eat. So what would you be busy with it?
Yeah, good question. Anything you can think of? How about Yom Tov?
Oh, sure. I'm only in Shabbos. Okay.
So cooking it would be okay, but mafshit is not.
Right. Peeling apart the natural layers of leather, example, a belt or shoe. However, if the layers were originally separate strips of leather that were glued together, peeling them apart is korea.
Now, by the way, I want you to remember that this Sefer is a book on the 39 Melochos. It is not like Shmir Shabbos Hilchos, or a practical guide to what to do. He's explaining the Melochos, whether or not they could be practically violated because there's some other impediment in the way, like mukta, that doesn't change the definition of the Melocha. Could be that when you get to a piece of raw chicken, you won't handle it because on Shabbos it's mukta. But nevertheless, we need to know what the Melocha is. All right, next step in the process, ma'abed.
Tanning in the Mishkan. Tanning was required to prepare the hides of the elim and of the tachash, rams and an animal endowed with beautiful fur that were used for the coverings of the Mishkan. The basic premise of ma'abed: raw hides are highly perishable and will rapidly decompose and rot if not properly preserved. The process of preserving the hides and transforming them into leather is called tanning and is the melocha of ma'abed. Thus, the purpose of ma'abed is to preserve animal skins. How leather is made. The making of leather involves three basic steps: curing, tanning, finishing. The first two steps, curing and tanning, are both meant to achieve the same purpose, that of preserving the hide. The first step, finishing, is the process of working the leather to either give it a soft, supple texture or to achieve a firm or even hard material by pressing the leather as in the making of tefillin. Any one of these three steps is the melocha of ma'abed. Curing.
Rabbi, sorry to ask you, Rabbi, I haven't got my text with me. I haven't got my book with me. This ma'abed, is it with an ayin or an aleph?
Ayin.
Thank you.
Like avoida.
Curing. The raw hides are first cured by covering them with salt or by soaking them in a brine solution. This dehydrates the skin. Salt and brine draw out moisture, thereby inhibiting decay. Curing is necessary in order to prevent the hides from spoiling before they are ready for the tanning. Although salting is only a first step in preserving the hide, it is nevertheless the full-fledged melocha of ma'abed. The hide is not completely cured until the entire tanning process is completed, which can take several weeks. Tanning. After being thoroughly cleaned of hair and excess flesh, the hides are soaked in successively stronger and more potent tanning solutions, sometimes for weeks, until the hides are completely cured, i.e. non-perishable. The hides are then stretched in order to straighten and flatten out the warps in the skin that are part of its natural shape as it comes off of the animal's body. Finishing. Achieving the final finish of the leather is the last step. The leather might be made soft and supple, example, shoe uppers, by applying oils, or it can be made hard and firm, example, shoe soles, by trampling on it, or by compressing it with heavy rollers. Example, accordingly, one should not soften the stiffness in the leather uppers of a new pair of shoes, example, around the mouth of the shoe called the quarter, by bending the leather back and forth in order to make the shoe more comfortable. In suede leathers, a velvet-like finish is created by applying an abrasive. All of these finishing methods are also the Meloch of Ma'abed.
Look how much you learn just by learning Hilchos Shabbos. What's going on in the world. Okay? I bet nobody ever thought about how a shoe ends up being a shoe.
Polishing or oiling leathers. The Meloch of Ma'abed can apply to finished leather as well as raw hides. Examples, oiling old leather upholstery, shoes, boots, gloves, or an old leather belt to make them soft and supple is Ma'abed. Similarly, the use of leather preservatives is also Ma'abed. Polishing shoes with shoe polish may also be Ma'abed, because many shoe polishes also contain leather preservatives. Polishing shoes also involves the Meloch of Tzaveya and Mamachek. Inserting a shoe tree into a shoe. One may insert a shoe tree into a shoe to retain its shape, i.e. to prevent it from curling, as is common with old shoes, or from shrinking when wet. However, if the shoe is already out of shape, the shoe tree may not be inserted to return it to its former shape, because stretching and repairing the leather is a form of Ma'abed, as explained in example B. In addition, repairing the unusable shoe, i.e. to make it functional, is also Makabeh Patish. Preserving foods. As explained earlier, the Meloch of Ma'abed is essentially the act of process of preserving an item of any kind to prevent it from spoiling. One might therefore deduce quite reasonably that any method of preserving perishable foods is also considered Ma'abed. Ein ibud be'ochlim. However, the Talmud states that Ma'abed does not apply to foods. Ein ibud be'ochlim. This is because the Meloch of Ma'abed must entail preservation of a permanent item of use, i.e. functional utensils or objects, as was done in the Mishkan with hides. Foods are naturally subject to a single use, i.e. consumption, and are thus not functional objects. Resemblance to Ma'abed. Even so, the sages imposed rabbinical restrictions on methods of food preserving because of the resemblance and potential confusion between Ma'abed with foods and non-foods. In the era of the Talmud and Shulchan Aruch, refrigerators, as well as many other modern conveniences taken for granted today, were completely unheard of. It was a simple fact of life that fruits, vegetables, meat, poultry, and fish would rapidly spoil if not promptly eaten or preserved in salts and similar preservatives. Consequently, when families had an animal slaughtered, the hides and much of the meat would be preserved for storage and later use. Various fruits, vegetables, legumes, and other foods were likewise preserved on a regular basis. Because tanning and food preservation are similar processes that were everyday activities, the Chazal found it necessary to impose restrictions on some of the permissible aspects of preserving, i.e. salting and pickling certain foods, because of the potential for confusion and inadvertent transgression. The ordinance remains in force even today under a general principle applying to rabbinic ordinances, dictating a permanent continuity of such laws until revoked by a fully authorized Sanhedrin. Conventia.
Okay. So we're going to see that this applies to vegetables, and that's a practical example. We'll get to it on the next page. Resemblance to bishul.
According to some poskim, Rambam, the prohibition of salting and preserving foods is related to the Meloch of bishul, not Ma'abed. The explanation is as follows. A heavily salted food acquires the halachic status of a hot solid substance, roze achte katzli, with respect to many areas of halacha. Similarly, food soaking in a pickling solution attain to some degree the status of mevushal. Although the halachic concept of a roseach katzli does not truly apply to the laws of Shabbos, The sages nevertheless prohibited salting foods on Shabbos because the parallel perception that the food is thus being roasted or cooked is present. Pickling, as mentioned just earlier, preserving food is rabbinically prohibited because the process of preserving stimulates the Melochos of Ma'abed, simulates the Melochos of Ma'abed. Pickling meats and vegetables. Included in the rabbinic restriction of preserving foods is the pickling of raw fish, meat, and vegetables. Examples: one may not put fresh cucumbers into a pickling solution or pickle juice to cause them to sour. However, returning pickles to the jar is permitted. Similarly, one may not put pickling spices on meats to preserve them. Fermentation of liquids. One may not add vinegar to wine or similar liquids, thereby causing them to ferment. However, if one's intention is merely to dilute the vinegar, adding it to the wine is permitted. Salting foods. As explained earlier, the first step of the tanning process, curing, requires covering the skin with a layer of salt. Because sprinkling salt to preserve the hide is an important part of ma'abed, the sages prohibited sprinkling salt on some foods and vegetables as well. This is due to the close resemblance of this activity to this malocha. Example: one may not salt a plate of cucumbers, radishes, peas, onions, garlic, scallions, peppers, lettuce, carrots, turnips, or string beans.
Now, before you jump and say what, I can't put salt on my vegetables, so hold on for B1.
Note, some vegetables have a high prevalence of insect infestation and may not be used prior inspection. Methods of salting that are forbidden. Although the basic reason for the prohibition of salting foods is because this process resembles preserving and is thus similar to ma'abed, there are essentially two applications of salting that are forbidden. Salting even a single piece to draw out its moisture, salting a few pieces of vegetables at a time, even if merely for flavoring. These two applications are forbidden for different reasons, as will be explained. Salting a single piece. Salting changes the food substance. According to many commentaries, salting foods is prohibited because the salt tends to draw out the moisture from the food to soften or harden its texture or to change its properties in other ways. This process is similar to the tanning process because this kind of change occurs when salting and curing hides. The Chazal therefore prohibited any salting of foods that can cause similar results. Based upon this explanation, even salting a vegetable singly is forbidden if the purpose is to bring about a result that is similar to that of the pickling process, and it is in the form of which it is usually pickled. Most vegetables are pickled whole. Example: one may not salt a vegetable singly with the intention of letting it stand to allow the salt to draw out some of its moisture. If in the example above, the salting is meant to accomplish a result which is similar to that which typically occurs with pickling and preserving, the natural fluids and juices of a food are drawn out by the salt. This is rabbinically prohibited because it resembles the tanning process. Salting many vegetables together. The salting simulates tanning and preserving. The poskim state that salting many vegetables at once is forbidden even if they will be eaten right away, i.e. even before there is enough time for any moisture to be emitted from the vegetables. Salting of vegetables in this manner is forbidden because it gives the appearance of a tanning process in which many pieces of hides are salted at once. Example: one may not sprinkle salt on a plate of cucumbers, radishes, onions, etc., even if he intends to eat them right away. One may not even sprinkle salt on one vegetable that is on a plate with other vegetables because it is impossible to avoid getting some of the salt on some of the other vegetables as well. According to some commentaries, Rambam, salting several vegetables together is prohibited because this is a typical aspect of pickling and preserving foods, which is similar in some ways to bishul. Salting foods therefore has the appearance, to some degree, of a pickling operation in which foods are salted together to be pickled or preserved. Therefore, any manner of salting a food that resembles pickling is forbidden, even if one has no intentions of pickling or preserving. So
he's quoted several opinions, and it's not clear what we do in the end. That's what he continues now. What is practically mutter or osur?
The accepted halakha. regarding salting vegetables. Below are the practical outcomes of the discussion in the previous paragraphs. Salting one item. One may not salt even a single vegetable if the purpose is to allow it to stand and sweat out its moisture. As explained earlier, this activity resembles the tanning process. Salting many items. It is forbidden to sprinkle salt on a plate of vegetables, even if they will be eaten right away. As explained earlier, the salting has a similarity to pickling. Salting one item on a plate. One may not even sprinkle salt on one particular vegetable that is on a plate with other vegetables, because it is impossible to avoid getting some of the salt on some of the other vegetables at the same time. However, one may sprinkle salt on one solitary vegetable on his plate. Dipping an item into salt. Dipping a single vegetable into salt with the intention of eating it right away is permitted because this simple action bears no resemblance to either pickling or tanning. Sprinkling salt on one item. One may sprinkle salt on a single vegetable in his hand or by itself on a plate or napkin, because salting a single solitary vegetable for immediate consumption does not resemble pickling or tanning in any way. The minhag regarding dipping several vegetables into salt one after the other. According to some poskim, one may salt several separated vegetables on a plate by dipping each piece individually into salt with the intention of eating it at that sitting. They contend that the salting in this case does not truly resemble pickling or tanning because each vegetable is dipped into salt separately, whereas a true pickling operation is typically done on a larger scale. According to this view, dipping the vegetables singly into salt is permitted, even though some of the vegetables on the plate may begin to sweat and release some moisture by the time they are eaten. The prohibition of salting, i.e. giving the appearance of tanning, does not apply here to this minor sweating because the salting was only meant to spice the vegetables for a present meal, not to cause the vegetables to sweat completely from the salting. The prevalent minhag is not in accordance with this view. Therefore, one may not dip vegetables one after another into salt on Shabbos, even with the intention of eating them all at the meal. If one desires salt on a vegetable, he may dip it into salt or sprinkle salt onto it and eat it right away.
Must add, because I don't see him bringing it.
Pretty hectic, that, Rabbi. I don't know about not adding salt.
The Alter Rebbe writes that the only way it's forbidden to salt things is if there's a heavy layer of salt that covers it. So if you're salting it lightly and you don't see a layer of salt, it would be mutter. I think that most people don't salt their salads to such a degree. Now, that's one thing. Another thing is that salads generally have ingredients which are not suitable for pickling, like lettuce and things like that. So that would also be okay. So bekitzer, if you're not salting it heavily, then you can salt the salad. If you are salting it heavily, then don't salt it in the salad bowl. Salt it on your plate as you eat it.
Rabbi Wineberg, sorry, isn't that the point of putting like oil or some other liquid into your salad first and then salting it afterward? Because then, you know, that's what we were always taught to do. Put in the liquid first and then the salt.
So he said if you add other ingredients which dilute the effect of the salt, then look at number 4. I think our pages are different. By me, it's on page 909, near the top of the page, about 7 lines down, number 4, where other added ingredients dilute the salt's effect. So if you're preparing a salad and you put in oil or dressing, he's going to talk about the dressing in a minute. And on page 910, number 4, he'll talk about adding the other ingredients which dilute the effect of the salt. So dressing, oil, other things. So if you're not only salting it, but you're preparing a salad with dressing, then that Easter of salting doesn't apply. Okay, we'll get to that now.
Thank
So can
you.
I just clarify, Rabbi Weinberg, the Alter Rebbe is saying that if you have a cabbage salad, which is a vegetable that is typically salted and pickled and fermented, and it's in a salad bowl, you can lightly salt that.
Correct.
Okay. And
The
what's
issue
the
is that
one?
there's no real cutoff point.
Yes,
between
exactly. My next
lightly
question.
salting and so the rule of thumb is if you're covering it with a layer of salt, no good. If you're not, then it's fine. Okay.
Making a cucumber salad on Shabbos. It is forbidden to salt slices of cucumber and allow them to cure in the salt prior to adding the vinegar and other ingredients. Doing this is a full-fledged transgression of the rabbinic ordinance of salting of vegetables. However, one may add the salt right after the vinegar. Sprinkling pepper and other spices onto vegetables and foods. The restrictions of salting foods do not apply to other spices, example, pepper, paprika, onion powder, etc. Salting is forbidden because its effect on some foods is similar to its effect on hides, i.e., it causes substantive changes in the food matter. This is not the case with spices that merely add flavoring, but do not affect the food itself. Conditions that permit salting of vegetables on Shabbos. Not all vegetables are subject to the prohibition of salting on Shabbos. Only vegetables that are suitable for pickling are restricted in this way. Vegetables that are not suitable for preserving, or those that are usually not pickled, may be salted on Shabbos. There are 4 separate conditions under which salting vegetables on Shabbos is permitted. One,
Stop
if it is
for a second. The next 3 pages will go through these 4 conditions. Okay.
It is not ordinarily pickled in its present form. 2, the salting is done one at a time. 3, the foods or vegetables are cooked. 4, where other added ingredients dilute the salt's effect. So it can be one of these conditions, Rabbi?
Right.
Yeah. If the vegetable is not usually pickled in its present form. Vegetables that are not ordinarily pickled in a particular form may be salted when they are in that non-pickling form. The rabbinic ordinance against salting applies only to instances where the salting bears some resemblance to the process of pickling and preserving. Vegetables that are never preserved while in a specific form may therefore be salted once in that non-pickling form, because it is obviously not a simulation of the pickling process. Example, it is permitted to salt sliced tomatoes because slices of tomato are not suitable for pickling. Similarly, one may sprinkle salt on peeled cucumbers or gherkins because these vegetables are usually pickled only in their peels. However, whole tomatoes, example, cherry tomatoes, may not be salted because they are often pickled.
At condition 1. Remember, each condition permits the salting by itself. 2.
I'm just thinking, Rabbi, can I ask a question? So you do get like English cucumbers that are sliced in the same way that you would slice them in a salad, and you find them as pickles, not whole or not with their skin, or like the round disc even cut in half, or it's the same thing.
All right, then
Rabbi.
they are in a state where they are pickled.
So you can't put
You
salt
couldn't.
on them.
So you couldn't.
You couldn't.
But the thing is that if they're pickled in some kind of not just brine, but other things as well, or if you're now putting them into other kinds of spices or vinegar or salad oil, that would permit it. Okay, but the fact that it's not the way it's pickled, it is.
Rabbi, may I ask a question,
right.
please? I often use cherry tomatoes, but I cut them in half and then they're salted in the salad.
No, So when you put them in the salad, they'll have this din of the whole salad, okay? So you'll either salt it lightly or you'll dip them one at a time and you're going to go through.
Why does he give an example particularly of cherry tomatoes?
Because bigger tomatoes in slices are not normally pickled. They pickle whole tomatoes, except for cherry tomatoes. They're small and they're pickled as they are. That's why he gives that example. Okay, let's stop. Let's stop here and we will continue in Mitzvah next week. There's not much to the Melochos of Ma'abed. Thank you very much, Eleni, for the shir.
Rabbi, I have a question. I have a question, please, as Anne.
Yeah.
Assuming you have an onion, a very big onion, and you need half of the onion for your salad. So you cut it. Now you're sitting with the other half of the onion. Now we know that we can't leave this onion open and lying around. So what we do is we put it and cut it or whatever under oil so that you can use it later. Is that allowed, or is that considered a type of preservation and pickling? There's no salt.
The oil doesn't matter, but the main thing is leave the head of the onion on when you cut the onion in half.
Okay. Another question. You once referred in one of your Shabbos droshes many years ago to a book about salt. What was the name of the book and who is the author, please?
The name of the book is Salt. Who is the author? I don't remember offhand. I'll check it out.
Do you have the book?
Yeah, but it's a fascinating book because it talks about the history of salt over the ages, and wars were fought over salt because they're so important to life. As salt licks, important for animals. Soldiers were paid in salt in Roman times, and that's where we get the word salary. So there's all kinds of fascinating things about salt, and you're welcome to the book.
Thank you.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
I've got I think a mental block on this specific area. I keep asking these questions. So you have a plastic bottle of water or Coke or cold drink, and you have that plastic lid that's been put on it, and there's no problem, and I understand why, to open that. But then you have a plastic milk, and you have the same cap with that same plastic cap, and there is a problem to open that. I'm not talking about the metal lids now. We've dealt with that. Why is there a difference between the cold drink and the milk?
Not as far as I know. The difference is between the caps that are usually used.
But it's the same concept. It's a plastic thing joined with another rim that you're going to dislodge from each other.
I don't see any difference. Where did you see that there is a difference?
No, I just thought that you have to open your bottle of milk before Shabbos, but you don't have to open your bottle of sparkling water or Coke.
The only difference I can think of that you might have heard is a small bottle which is consumed usually at once, and a larger bottle which is consumed over several days. That's the only difference you might have heard. I still don't think there would actually be a difference in halacha, because the bottle cap, just see if you can see me. The bottle cap is not considered making a kli when you take it off. Okay?
Yeah.
It's already there before. It's just pinched onto the, what's it called, onto the bottle. So you're not going to use the cap to contain anything except to close the bottle. So it's not making a kli. It is preferable because there are some poskim which forbid it. So it's preferable to open all bottles before Shabbos.
So you go to shul and you see at Kiddush, none of the cold drink bottles are open, and everyone's opening cold drink bottles on Shabbos.
They obviously rely on the poskim who say that it's okay. And because there's a whole lot of cold drink bottles, and they're concerned probably that they'll go flat if they open a,
Yes.
if they open a lot of them. That's why they don't open them. But with water, for sure you can open it. Nothing's going to happen to the water.
I didn't
So
know
then-
you couldn't. I didn't know you mustn't open milk bottles on Shabbos. I thought you could.
I'm telling you that you can, but it's
You can, that's what I
preferable
thought.
to open it before Shabbos because there are some poskim who say that you're forming a kli, and therefore it's also to open it to unscrew the cap off the bottle.
Okay, so it's
Thank
the
you.
clean.
Thanks so much, Trevor.
Okay, yes, Raz.
No, I'm saying, is it the clean then that's the problem, not
Yes,
the open?
yes.
Yes.
How does it
Anyone
apply?
got to?
How would it apply, Rabbi, to a tin can that you pull the?
Tab.
Yeah.
That's a completely separate
Different.
melocha,
Yeah, that's different.
and that's the melocha of koireya because you're tearing along a pre-designated line, the melocha of koireya. So I said there that what you should do is pop the tab.
Just open it halfway.
Don't, yeah,
Yeah.
just pop it enough so
Okay.
you're able to pour out and then pour out.
Thank you.
The same with a carton of milk, because when you open a carton of the boxed milk, there is also sometimes a plastic seal that doesn't always open when you open the milk. Can you just pop that?
Trying to picture it.
A bottle, a
Not sure
carton
what you
of,
mean by a seal, except for the fact that the cap is attached to a round piece of plastic that
No,
stays
it's a piece
on
of
the bottle.
paper, Rabbi. It's a piece of
Yeah.
silver paper. It's a
piece of
silver.
foil.
Oh, yeah, okay. That piece of silver paper, I don't think it would be considered koireya. You're just peeling it off. Nor do I think that it is osur because of tearing apart two things which are glued. There is no glue.
No.
It's just pressed on. So I don't think that would incur
But
that problem.
can you actually remove it out of the carton, or do you just
Yes.
pop it and let it hang in the carton?
Yeah, I don't see an isa of koireya there. You can remove it.
Thank you.
And
On the
just in
contrary.
terms of a carton, Rabbi, in terms of a carton, we had a cereal carton. I wasn't sure if the two pieces, it wasn't open before. I didn't know it was put in the cupboard. So my daughter wanted it, and we weren't sure that the top pieces that were together were either stuck or not. So we decided to destroy the opening by cutting underneath it.
Good.
Even though I haven't opened it, regardless, so Korea may have not been, I wasn't prepared to risk it. But I'm still creating a storage vessel, even though I've destroyed the opening of it, haven't I?
The box is where you're going to put the bag of cereal back into.
There's no bag in the box. The box itself contains the cereal.
Is it something which you use over a longer period of time?
Yeah, that cereal, she poured a little bit of cereal. It'll be there over the next few weeks or whatever she eats it on Shabbos. So it is storing that cereal in and of itself, the box. There's no packets. It's not it's a different kind of cereal. That's what concerned me. I mean, we are still opening it and creating a long-term storage vessel. We're not destroying the box completely.
Yeah, we learned this halacha in the context of sugar bags. Stacks of sugar or things like that, which last for a period of time. You're staying a couple of weeks. I think mostly these boxes that contain these cereals, the cereals are more like oatmeal.
Yes, yeah, it's a granola. I mean,
You
I don't think
get-
it'll be wheat.
Granola can be eaten
It will be
as
three.
is. Doesn't
It will
need
be
cooking.
three Shabboses, and she'll finish it, I'm sure.
Okay.
Her
Granola
treat.
only on Shabbos?
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting rule. Can I
So
ask
it's
you
fine.
why? Can I ask you why only on Shabbos? It's the
Um,
flavored granola.
It's very high in sugar, and yeah, I do other things for her in her week.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay.
Rabbi
All
So
right.
it's not
Weinberg?
creating it's
but
not creating a storage vessel then. It's not a problem that we've opened it on Shabbos and let it remain there stored. I mean,
I would empty it. I would empty it.
Yes, that's what I thought.
Empty it into
Okay.
a plastic bag.
Thank
Rabbi
you.
Weinberg, I have a question,
Yeah.
please. I was asked on Shabbos how to deal with my grandson having a bad nappy rash. Nothing was prepared. And what can we do with the cream that was needed without doing the mareach? So I didn't know. If you
So
can help.
Powder?
remember, I told you that every good Jewish home should have a goy.
Yeah.
And because the baby's needs are considered like a choilish ein bois takone, so the goy can do whatever is necessary. You can tell her directly to take care of the nappy and put on whatever you need to put on, and then you'll put on the diaper.
And failing that,
if there's a goy. But if they're failing that, you can take something like a wet wipe and wipe the baby down, and then put on the cream or ointment or whatever directly onto the baby or onto the nappy, and then just proceed to put the nappy on the baby.
in other
So
words, without
don't
smearing,
do
no
it.
smearing.
Right.
That's exactly what we did. That's exactly what I said we should do. And that was
Good,
done.
so you
Okay.
did know.
Well, but I wasn't sure. Thank you.
Okay.
Can't you use a
Also,
sheet where you
sorry,
put
one more
the-
thing.
can't
Yes,
You want-
Tivia?
Yeah, so I'm confused about the question about the cereal box, because why is it not a kli before the kli was sealed? In other words, it was a box that was closed and we were just opening the box. It was already a kli. We're not making a kli.
Yeah, the way I understand it, it's completely atum. It's completely closed all around. See, what I'm picturing is a box of oats.
Yeah, like a jungle oats box that is not flat on top. It's an American brand. It's like an OU thing, and then it peaks like this, and there's a little seal here. So you pop that open, and the box is like this. So it looks completely like, and the cereal's right inside.
Then Tivia's right. It was already a kli before, a kli which has been closed, and you're now opening it. It wouldn't be a problem.
So the same would apply.
Sorry?
The same would apply. So the same would apply, say, to a packet of potato chips. You could cut it and leave the potato chips in the packet. Thank you.
Yeah, that's fine.
So how do you open, Rabbi? Then you've got a box of oaties, for example, right? You cannot tear that tab because then you are cutting along a perforated thing. You cannot lift it because then you're separating it because it's glued. How would you open that box?
I would do it on Friday. And,
Yes,
I mean, the child didn't arrive
when
on
you
Shabbos.
it,
You know
you
that
do
the
it-
child is going to be there.
yeah.
So do it on Friday. Failing that, you cut off the top of the box. You know, you can even cut off the tab.
With the scissors?
You can do it with a scissor or with a food scissor.
Yes.
Well, even if you don't have a food scissor, you can do it with a regular scissor. It's muktzah, but you're using it for a permitted purpose. So it's a klisha malachta le'isra, which you're using for a dover amut, and it's okay. Cut off the top of the box and then open it.
And
That's
then
it.
that packet inside is also sealed. It's heat sealed. So
That's
do you
heat
cut
sealed. There's no glue.
that you cut also?
That you can pull apart.
Oh, you can pull apart. Okay. Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay, everybody. Have a great week.
Thanks, Rabbi. Thank you.
Thank you, Stivia.
Thank you.